Welcome to Become the Leader, the show that equips you to rise higher, lead stronger, and become the leader you would follow. Hey guys, Jody, Holland, and Megan Slaughter here on the Become the Leader podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic, which is choosing what is hard for you. And I don't think you get to choose whether life is hard, but you do get to choose which hard is going to shape your future. The leaders who win don't wait for motivation, they choose discipline. They define their standard, they stay consistent, and they do it even when it's uncomfortable or painful. So you got to decide today which hard you're willing to carry on purpose. And the harder the future you want, the easier you need to go today. And the easier the future you want, the more you need to be disciplined today. So let's get into this. Megan, you had a blog that you wrote not too long ago about this very subject. Talk about that for just a little bit.
Yes, so I blog every week and I really just talk about what's on my mind. And this was the beginning of the year, so I was thinking about what's coming ahead. And at the beginning of the year, everybody sets goals and resolutions, and those can be really hard to stick to. But the thing about that is that it can be really hard to give up on those goals as well. So when you have this renewed energy, you need to be able to set out a plan for yourself and choose the path that you want to pursue. And each path is going to come with some bumps and curves that you may not expect, and that can be really hard to overcome. However, you have to keep pushing forward and pursuing the purpose that's important to you. Because when you're driven by purpose, everything else is going to come a little bit more naturally to you. So I think it's important that no matter which direction you're going to face something that is hard,
Oh, yeah.
but you have to choose to overcome that and keep pushing forward on it.
So I was thinking about that I don't think life offers us any easy options. I think it just gives us different hard options. And what you're saying is, setting the goals can be hard and going after what you want with your New Year's resolution. But then it's also hard when you give up on that. But the difference is when you give up on that, you're saying, well, I want to sacrifice right now. So right now is easier. And in psychology, that's called a dopamine bias. Whatever feels better in the moment, whatever dopamine rush you can get, that's what we have a tendency to do. That's why people procrastinate. That's why we choose the easy path instead of the hard path, is we're listening to our brain and going, I just want to feel good now. And I was thinking about on New Year's Day, one of my friends, Brad Pascal, he and I said, okay, let's go do this polar plunge. It was 34 degrees outside, and we went up to the Amarillo Town Club. And every January 1st, they do a polar plunge into the outdoor swimming pool. And when we got there, I was thinking, oh, we'll just jump in and jump out. It won't be too bad. I've done this before. But they go, what's going to go on in your body is you're immediately going to think, I want to get out. I want to challenge you to breathe through the pain and commit to 3 minutes in the water. And like I felt this fear pop up in my mind, and I started thinking, 3 minutes in it's 34 degrees outside. I'm in my swimming suit and that's it. But I thought, okay, I can do this. So in my mind, I thought you've got to set a goal, just like what you're talking about in the goals. So I set my goal. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to make it all the way across the pool and all the way back. And then I will be relaxed by that point and I'll just breathe into it and I'll commit to the full 3 minutes. So I made it across and back. Well, that was like 90 seconds. I was like, dang, that didn't take long enough. So then you had to really slow down your breathing and you had to just kind of allow yourself to stay in the water and to change what you're thinking about. And I think that's an important point of we drift when we don't have a goal. And drifting is easy. Like drifting is whatever feels better in the moment, that's what we do. Because what would have felt great right after jumping in is getting my frozen behind out of the water. But it was overriding that. And so, New Year's resolutions, I don't know if this is still true, but a few years ago, I had read that like 90% of people give up on their New Year's resolutions by February the 14th. So by Valentine's Day, they're like, I'm out. It's just too much for me. So I really kind of think when we look at this, to not drift, you have to have a goal and you have to be willing to develop consistency. And so, like, think about, like, I know you do Zumba and you like going to the gym. I love going to the gym myself. I go to the gym because I love going to the gym. I love the process. And that's the part that in business people forget to fall in love with is they think it's about a destination. I'm going to jump in here, I'm going to make a bunch of money, I'm going to sell this thing and I'm out of here. But they don't love the process. They just look for the outcome. And you find that the outcome becomes very disappointing because you thought you would feel perfect when you hit the outcome, but then you don't.
Right. And I think that every overnight success that you've ever seen has years of work under their belt.
Hmm.
You don't just wake up one day and have everything that you want. You have to actually work towards it. And your example with the polar plunge was physical discomfort. And we
Yeah.
want to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But that goes on the mental side as well. So mentally, we don't want to be uncomfortable. So we tend to put ourselves in this little zone of comfortability. And when we live in that zone of comfortability, we live in ignorance of our full potential. You have to be willing to step outside of that square in order to see what's coming next.
So that's kind of like a David Goggins where he talks about just do something hard every day. And I was really looking at this, and I think there's two types of hard that we do. There is constructive hard, which is what you were just describing about getting out of your comfort zone, doing something that builds your capacity, makes you a better person. And then there's consequential hard. This is pain that results from not doing the hard thing when you should have done the hard thing. So that would be the way I would talk about it in business is training and development is hard. You've got to discipline people to be there. You've got to make sure that you have a plan. You've got to bring in, trainers from outside to develop the skill sets in your people that you need. Or consequential hard is high turnover, low performance, frustrated employees, really burned out supervisors. So both are hard. You're just going to determine which one you want to spend the money on. And I talked about this years ago. I did a video on what is the cost of turnover. And I started describing to clients, we're not talking about whether or not you're going to spend $8,000. What we're talking about is, do you want to spend $2,000 fixing the problem or $8,000 by not fixing the problem? So either way, you're going to spend the money. The question is, do you want to be intentional about it or accidental about it? If you have a solid plan for the year and you stick to your plan and you do your regular meetings, that's fantastic, but it's really hard to do to stick to that plan. Or you could just go with chaos and see what comes. But that's really hard too because you have no idea where your business is. You can be consistent or you can be in crisis mode. You can coach your people or you can just constantly think, well, I better write them up. So you have constructive or consequential. And I think as you step back in business, you're thinking about it from the perspective of identity. And I know you talk about this a lot. I know I heard you do a speech on perspective and thinking about where you're looking from and how you're looking at things that determines your perspective. So talk a little bit about perspective from the idea that who I believe I am shifts the way that I approach any challenge.
I think all change starts mentally, and you have to condition that into yourself. So it's not going to happen automatically, but you have to become a person who believes that you're capable of more. And I've always loved perspective because you have the ability to shift your perspective at any point, but it's a choice. So you can stay where you are and you can look out the window and see the pretty sky, or you can come a little bit closer and you can look at the flowers and you can look at the finer details. So where you shift your focus is where your life is going to start heading. So it's kind of like when you're driving. If you look off to the right, you'll start veering to the right. If you look towards all of your failures, you're going to see every shortcoming you've ever had. But if you look to your potential, then you're going to start believing things about yourself that gets you to the point where you want to be. So you have to ask yourself where you are currently and where you want to be. And then you start taking those actions that gets you to that point. But it starts with that belief. You have to become the kind of person who believes that you are capable of doing that thing before
Yeah.
you go out and do that thing. And that's why every single year I set a goal for myself that I believe is going to be hard. Something that's going to make me uncomfortable, but I know that I can achieve that thing if I set my mind to it. So it may be difficult in the beginning, but by the end of it, I can look back and I can be so incredibly proud of myself because at the beginning of the year, that part of me would not have been able to do that. But by the end of the year, I can say, I did that.
Yeah. And that's that, to me, that's that consistency. It's like you're saying, I'm the kind of person who, and if they fill in the blank with, I'm the kind of person who takes action even when I don't feel like it. That was same kind of concept. Jim Collins talked about that when he told the story of Robert Scott and his team going, I think it was to the South Pole. They were originally going to go to the North Pole and then they changed and were going to the South Pole. But there was another team that was trying to beat him. But every day, Scott and his team, good weather or bad weather, tried to make it 20 miles every day, whether you feel like it or not. And even Stephen Pressfield in his book, The War of Art, he was talking to one of his mentors and he said, do you only write when you're inspired or do you write out of discipline? He goes, oh, I only write when I'm inspired, which is 9 a.m. every day. And he said, every day I set myself up to go do the writing and I'm gonna do that. And that's think about that concept of I'm the kind of person who takes action. Kind of last correlation I'd have on that is think about the hero's journey. When you get into the midst of a struggle, you're either going to be the hero of your story, a victim in your story, or you're going to be the villain of the story. That's your three options in your story. If you're the victim of the story, when things get hard, you go, oh, poor me. I shouldn't have to deal with this. This is just wrong. And then we shut down and wait to be saved. If you're the villain, you go, this is unfair that I'd have to deal with this. Other people should suffer as well, and you try to make other people have just as hard of a time as what you're having. But when you're the hero of your story, you say, wow, this is not what would have wanted, but I'm in the situation. So what can I do? And I like to ask the question, in this situation with the resources that I have, what can I do to make it better? One, two, three. Situation, resources, action. And when we think of it in that way, we start taking action and doing our 20-mile march no matter what's going on. I think the most dangerous days are not the hard days, they're the easy days when you're tempted to abandon your discipline and go, oh, I don't really have to. I can just do whatever I want to do today. Because the ultimate courage that we have in our journeys is, can I be consistent when I don't feel like it? That's the hard thing. And it's fighting the feelings because, I mean, to be honest, being successful is boring. It's boring because there's no real applause for all the things that you do on the nights and the weekends and all the preparation. There's no applause for the disciplined portion of the journey. There's only applause when you cross the finish line. And so go back to what you were saying about overnight successes. You and I've talked about this, that the average overnight success is 20 years in the making. It's just all of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, have you heard this person? Oh my, they're the greatest singer ever and all that kind of stuff. Even Ed Sheeran, which I really like his music, he was on, I don't know, one of the late night shows and they're like, your voice is just so amazing and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, let me show you what I sounded like when I was playing in the bars for tips only. And he played a clip of like one of his early musical performances and they're like, oh, that is horrible. He goes, that's consistency. I played 6 nights a week for years before I ever got paid to play at a bar. I got tips only for years until my voice was good enough, my songs were good enough, and now I mean he's international music star, but nobody applauded the beatings. They only applauded the win.
There's a lot of truth to that, and I think training and discipline has to be at the forefront of everything that you do when you're seeking something out. So, like you said, the easy days are the days when you start to back off from that discipline. But if you keep pushing forward, again, one day you're going to wake up and look back and see how far you've come. You may not realize what you're doing each day, but that gradual change is building up to something great because slow progress is still progress. So, on those days when you want to give up, look back and reflect on where you've come from
Yeah,
because we don't always realize it. And it takes some intentionality to see where we've come from. And that gives us hope and some forward momentum for the future as well.
I agree. Yeah, consistency removes the emotion. And just like what you said, consistency compounds results. We may be impressed with intensity, but we don't need intensity. We need compounded results. And just like compound interest, it's the eighth wonder of the world. Compounded results are the same thing in our lives. It's just every day do what you're supposed to do, and things tend to work out. So I don't think that you get to choose whether life is hard. I think life's just hard. And I'm thinking about that even over the Christmas break, looking into this new year and looking back at the previous year. Every time I get time off, there's something hard I have to deal with. When I don't get time off, there's something hard I have to deal with. So you just have to decide, are you willing to carry yourself in a disciplined manner, carry yourself with purpose, and make sure that you do what's required today to get to the life that you want later in life? Or are you going to fall victim to that idea of, I want my dopamine now, and you get that easy rush of feeling good now, but then you feel awful later? It's hard to give things up. It's hard to eat right. It's hard to work hard. It's hard to study. It's hard to read books. It's hard to be great at anything, but you got to choose your hard.
Exactly. And I think going back to the perspective piece on that, you can sit there and you can think bad things always happen to me, and you can complain and you can put yourself back into that victim mentality, or you can think, how fortunate am I to be able to face these challenges and keep pushing forward? How fortunate am I to be so successful that this is the challenge that I'm facing? Because look back 10 years ago, and I never would have been in this position to be even facing something like this.
Yeah.
It's when we are coming into our potential that the obstacles become greater. And as you overcome those obstacles, your potential grows as well. So, the same thing about compounding effect of momentum and change. As you become more successful, you're going to face even greater challenges.
Yep. That's just the way that life works. The one common denominator between all successful people is they face bigger and bigger problems. So I want to leave you guys with this. I want you to think about one hard thing that you've been avoiding that you need to deal with. Is it a difficult conversation? Is it dealing with an employee that's causing chaos? Is it avoiding the gym or giving up on a goal already? What is the hard thing you've been avoiding? And then what is the thing that you need to choose intentionally to make your life better? And Zig Ziglar used to say things like, I know that there is something that you could do today in your personal life, your business life, your financial life, your spiritual life to make things worse. But I also know there's something you could do today in each of those areas to make your life better. Choose to do the thing that makes your life better, and then go through the show notes in this podcast. I think you'll get some good interesting information in there. Kind of got some of this outline. There's 6 different areas that we just talked about, and I would challenge you, face the hard things head on. So any parting thoughts, Megan?
We'll be linking the blog that we mentioned at the beginning of this, and also going off of what you just said about figuring out something that you can do that's hard. I think it's important to schedule a small amount of time every single day to commit to a habit that will lead to your success. So if it's 5 minutes of journaling at the beginning of each day or 5 minutes of meditation, whatever it may be, set some time aside and stick to it. Do it every single day, and you will see the results in great effects at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Jody Holland.
And I'm Megan Slaughter.
This has Become the Leader podcast. Make sure you subscribe it. Also, if you have any ideas for shows that you'd like us to talk about, send those to us. We would love to hear from you, and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining Become the Leader. Keep growing forward and become the leader you would follow.